you're called upon to repair a break as big as this, examine it carefully. An impact hard enough to cause this amount of damage may fracture the skin over a wider area than is first apparent. To play safe, you must remove a section of the wing at least 2 inches wider than the break on each side, and from rib to rib span-wise. So measure over to the ribs and lay out the area to be cut away. In this case, the front spar will form one edge of the hole. As before, cut the fabric with a sharp knife. Remember, the fabric is removed to leave 1.5 inches on each side of the opening you expect to cut in the wing skin. Now, using a saw, start cutting away from the hole until you have a rectangular opening that extends to within 3/8 of an inch of the ribs on each side. In this case, as the spar forms one edge of the hole, the wood is cut back to leave the edge of the spar apron exposed. Again, you will have to remove the old varnish by softening it with lacquer thinner, first around the outside and inside the opening along all surfaces where gluing is to be done. When the thinner has softened it up, scrape the varnish from the outside wood area. And don't forget to scrape the rib caps and the underside of the skin along the upper edge. This edge of the opening will need a stiffener, so take your measurements from rib to rib. The stiffener will be made from 3/8 inch spruce, and be sure it is the right length to fit snugly in place. When the stiffener is cut, mark around one end on a piece of 3/8 inch plywood to lay out the gussets, which will be glued against the rib caps to support the stiffeners. After making the inside vertical cuts, make a diagonal cut, like this. And saw out the excess wood. Never use a chisel, as it would damage the edge. Finish the gussets with a rasp so that they will fit properly. Then measure cordwise stiffeners of the correct length to fit against the rib caps. In this case, it will be necessary to shape the ends to fit against the spar apron. Such pieces should always be cut to conform with structural members that are involved in your repair jobs. You now have all the material necessary to go ahead. Put glue on the stiffener and plenty of glue on the underside of the skin where it is to be installed. If it is fitted correctly, the stiffener will stay in place while the gussets are installed. This is how the gusset is employed to support the stiffener. After being coated with glue, it is fitted around the stiffener and against the rib cap. You should have enough glue so that it oozes out slightly. A C-clamp will hold the gusset securely in place until the glue cures. Using a nailing strip to protect the edge of the panel, clamp the stiffener with C-clamps also. Now, glue the short stiffeners in place against the rib caps. Don't forget to use a piece of nailing strip to protect the skin when you put the clamps on. After the glue has cured, remove the clamps and dress all edges with a rasp. Now lay out a 10-to-1 scarf on all 4 sides of the opening. Remember, 10-to-1 means that the scarf will be 10 times the thickness of the skin at the point where the repair is made. Always measure the skin, because different thicknesses of plywood skin are used in constructing different parts of the wing. Use a block plane to start the scarf and set the blade to make a fine cut to avoid shaving off too much wood. The finer work can be done with a sharp chisel. A good point to remember is to keep all your tools in first-class shape for this work. Sand the scarf to finish it off and blow away the dust with the air hose. Don't forget the moist rag. It is necessary to use it in order to keep the pores of the wood open. Here's a tip for measuring the patch. Drive small nails at each of the 4 corners of the opening at the outside edge of the scarf. Nip off the heads and lay a piece of plywood of the same thickness as the skin on top of the nails. With your hammer, tap the plywood until the headless nails come through. Now, by laying your rule from nail to nail, you can easily lay out the correct size and shape of the patch. This method ensures perfect accuracy. The piece of plywood for the patch is now ready to be cut out and scarfed. Cut the patch to size with a knife. Break off the excess wood. And dress the edges with a plane to true them up. Then, lay out a 10-to-1 scarf. It will be easier to work on the patch if you tack it to the edge of the bench with a couple of small nails. Sand the scarf to finish it. And don't forget to use the air hose and damp rag. Now cut yourself some short nailing strips and start small nails in them at close intervals. Before going any further, pull the nails used in measuring the patch and clean all wood scraps out of the wing. Another good thing to remember, don't leave any tools inside. Try the patch for fit. It should be perfectly flush with the surface of the skin. Now tack it in place with a couple of nails. And make registration marks so that you can get it back the way you want it. The next step is to varnish the underside of the patch, but keep the varnish well inside the scarf. When all construction work inside the opening is completed, apply varnish to all new wood that has been installed. Again, don't let any varnish get on the scarf edge of the opening. You will now be ready for the gluing operation. And don't be afraid to use plenty of glue. Fit the patch in place. And here's where the registration marks are a big help. They will enable you to get the patch down right without sliding it around and scraping off all the glue. Tack the patch in a couple of places so that it won't slip. Wipe off any glue which oozes out. And cover the whole thing with a piece of waxed paper. Nailing strips are used to apply pressure on a patch of this kind, and 2 strips along each joint will be necessary. Tack the strips down from the center out toward the ends. This will avoid buckling and keep the patch lying flat. Be sure the strips are all nailed down tight. If they are loose, they won't produce the necessary pressure. When the glue has cured, rip off the paper and remove the strips. Don't try to get them off intact, but dig the nails out with your diagonals. If you try to pry them loose, you will damage the wing skin. In sanding, remove all traces of paper and try to get as neat a patch as the one you see here. Don't forget, at this point, the whole exposed wood area gets a coat of spar varnish. When the varnish has dried, tack-free, scuff sand it. But don't bear down so heavily that the varnish is cut away. The next step is to take measurements for your pre-doped fabric patch. As in all other types of repair, the fabric should be large enough to extend 1.5 inches past the exposed area on all sides. In cutting the fabric patch to correct size, use pinking shears so that the edges will not fray out. Now coat the area that is to receive the fabric